Kevin, good to see you, my friend.
Good to be back. How you doing?
I'm great. Listen, you've done a whole series of really fascinating interviews, and what I really want to do is kind of bring this all together. What have you learned? Because there is so much going on in this whole kind of community tokenization space, social tokens that you've been kind of looking at for us. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost a loaded question because there were so many great, not just sound bites, but pieces of insight in each of those conversations, which we can get into all of them because I want to cover. They each had their own, what I liked about that series is they each had their own kind of take or perspective on the way in which they see this community-driven kind of Web3 world coming together, right? And so...
Well, also, just before we get into it, the thing is most people can't see this yet.
Right.
They can see a bit of community around NFTs. Most of the projects are relatively small or niche, stuff like Friends with Benefits. So the mass consumer hasn't seen any of this yet. So I feel like this is our window into the world of the future for people. They don't know it yet, but we're planting all the flags to say, listen, this is where it's all going. Is that what you think?
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think one of the big takeaways was it's still a bit fragmented within the crypto space, right? And one of the big things we've harped on continuously is that concept of composability, right? And the ability for these different project teams, protocols, applications to all be able to talk with one another, but also build on top of one another, right? Oftentimes referred to in DeFi as like the building blocks.
What does that mean in practicality? Because composability is a word people throw around. Nobody knows what it means.
So what I think we're going to see, one of the next big waves, I think of, we'll call it composability, I think is actually going to be in this, we'll call it community/social token and NFT world. And when we talk about composability, what it really kind of represents is the ability for these different protocols and applications to talk with one another and allow for developers to build on top of them, right? So for example, if you're launching an NFT project, the fact that you're launching that on, let's say, Ethereum mainnet allows you to take advantage of the entire kind of developer ecosystem that's being built on Ethereum, and it allows people to come in and use those assets and build new applications or new use cases for those assets in ways maybe you hadn't foreseen before, right? So when we talk about things like NFTs, you're seeing an entire world of financialization or fractionalization of NFTs starting to pop up, right? Where you're actually able to drive more liquidity to these things. You can start tapping into, for community DAOs, for example, being able to leverage some of the applications that have been built and the interfaces that have been built to allow them to manage their treasuries. And that can be for community DAOs, that can be for investing DAOs. So the point around composability is it basically opens you up to this entire kind of developer ecosystem where people can build on top of whatever it is that you're creating at the kind of primitive level with these assets themselves, right? And so where that gets like really interesting, as we've talked about, is, you know, metaverse experiences, but really these community-driven projects. I think the optionality that is almost baked into some of them, right? Whether it's a CryptoPunks, Bored Ape, Yacht Club, and some of these other kind of periphery NFT projects, we don't necessarily know what is going to come of that IP yet and what people are going to build around it. And you're starting to see the early indications of what this could look like. But the fact that people can come in and, again, build applications on top of, you know, some type of base layer asset that you've created makes for a really kind of innovative and creative explosion that I don't think we've really seen yet, because a lot of these things are still a bit fragmented.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even get my head around it because it's moving so fast, and it is really at the experimentation phase as opposed to the mass rollout phase. So people don't know what's happening until it happens, I guess.
Yeah, and some of the big takeaways from this series, you know, for me, just at a high level, was one, I think the future is certainly going to be more community driven, right? And we're starting to see that in some of these more grassroots projects and grassroots movements. But I think that, again, is going to apply to some of the largest kind of brands, creators in the world, tapping into the collective creativity of your community, whether that community is made up of fans, customers who are interacting with your products and services. There's going to be entirely new business models that are created around these types of assets, right? And you and I have talked at length about, you know, what some of those could look like. The other thing that's interesting is culture becoming more investable, right? And one of the things I think you and I originally kind of were jamming on, or how you and I really connected initially, was around just the macro backdrop of what this looks like from a bigger picture standpoint, right? So we joke that crypto is macro. We talk about things like narrowing a wealth inequality gap. how do you bring and allow people to start to build wealth? Because we know that wealth is really created by owning things, right? Owning assets. It's not based on the income that you're making. And so what's interesting about some of these models is they're actually, paying contributors and the people who are creating that value. They're paying those who create the value in an asset that potentially could appreciate over time, that allows them to start building up, their own kind of portfolio of, capital assets. And it's not just some type of, next generation of employment where you're just making a fiat income from some other revenue source.
And what's interesting is, like, people think investing is about buying Apple shares or whatever it might be, your 401k. And suddenly, as you alluded to, culture becomes the investment, which is something we're all immersed in all the time. The cultures we want to be part of, we can have a stake in. And somebody mentioned to me, Yatsui from Animoco mentioned it as universal basic equity, which I thought was a genius idea. So you're operating in your normal internet world, you're a fan of this, you're a part of that, and that creates value. And soon, it won't be long before that value is in your wallet on your phone, and you can see, oh my God, my fan membership of Manchester United Sports Club has gone up in value. Oh, that one's going down. Maybe I want to leave that community because it's not working very well. It's an extraordinarily powerful concept for people to get their heads around.
Yeah, and you're unlocking value in areas that were previously more intangible, right? So we talk about, unlocking the value of fandom, for example, and there's pros and cons to the financialization of everything, but putting financial value around social capital within some of these communities, as you alluded to, is a really, really big unlock from Web3, right? Not only does it allow you to earn that kind of, let's call it universal basic equity by participating and creating value for these communities, but taking it a step back, and again, from that macro perspective, I think, Web3 is really unlocking an entirely new asset class, or I should say class of investable assets, right? At the exact moment from a macro perspective that the world needs it, right? And you and I have talked a lot about, again, if you're sitting there, you're a pension fund, you're a family office, and you're trying to, we can get into decades and decades of dovish monetary policy and record low interest rates and all of these things that are coming to a head at this point. But if you're getting pushed further and further up the risk curve, there really is no better asset class, in my opinion, or industry that offers you that kind of long-term growth potential that crypto and Web3 is unlocking now, right? And for now, it's still a bit more, we'll say niche, right? It's not as mainstream yet, but crypto and Web3, it's coming after just about every industry, whether those, incumbents and leaders today know it or not.
So let's talk through some of the people that you met, because you covered all sorts of different aspects that I thought was really interesting to show that this building block is not about one influencer who's going to just launch some tokens. What it is actually a whole new business model. That's what I've been thinking of this. This is a whole new business model for the internet. At its core, it is the most Web 3.0 part of this entire thing. More than NFTs, more than crypto itself, more than the metaverse even. I think this is it.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto. It's 100% free. Sign up now.